RG3 out and Kirk Cousins in, and that's the way it's going to be for 2015, according to Jay Gruden. Jason Reid, ESPN.com, NFL columnist. Welcome back to the Rich Eisen Show. Appreciate you calling in, Jason.
Anytime, Rich.
Thank you. So why now? How did this happen now, Jason? Couldn't the Redskins see the writing on the wall that this wasn't going to work out?
Well, Rich, it's been a whirlwind of activity. I'll try to just encapsulate everything here. Basically, Jay Gruden wanted to make this move last year. For Jay Gruden, he determined that Robert Griffin III, as Mike Shanahan and Kyle Shanahan determined, could not function in a pro-style offense if he had to operate from the pocket predominantly. That was the assessment that the previous head coach and offensive coordinator reached, and the current head coach reached that assessment very quickly. However, people above Jay Gruden were not willing to completely cut ties with Robert Griffin III. And, Rich, here's the thing. You can understand to a degree it was a huge, huge payout that the Redskins had to make to get Griffin, the 3 first-round picks, the number 2 pick to get the pick to take him, and then they paid him almost $25 million, or it'll be about $25 by the end of this year. So you can understand why there was reluctance on the part of senior management to make this move. But ultimately, the game tape from the Detroit Lions game was so bad, it was so horrific, that it was basically a situation where after everything that happened during the preseason, the training camp practices, which also were not good, that Jay Gruden and Scott McLuhan, the new general manager, determined they could not, in good conscience, move forward with Robert Griffin III as the starting quarterback, which has led us to this decision today. And the key thing, Rich, is all of 2015 will be Kirk Cousins. And the reason that's key is there are people in the organization who have felt that Cousins' turnover problems and his poor demeanor after bad games in large part had to do with the fact that Griffin was, that the specter of Griffin was always out there, that Kirk Cousins knew that they gave him all those picks and they paid him all that money, so he had to be perfect, essentially, to try to keep the job. The Redskins are no longer going to the Robert Griffin III well, so Kirk Cousins, what they're saying is, okay, you have no pressure on you other than to be a successful NFL quarterback, which is pressure in and of itself. Show us what you can do.
Jason Reid, ESPN.com, joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. Before moving forward, I still want to stay in the past. So how does Jay Gruden get hired if they already were told by a 2-time winning Super Bowl head coach that the kid is not a pocket passer, and the kid comes and basically says, I want to be a pocket passer? How do they go ahead and hire somebody whose offense is predicated on being a pocket passer? How does something like that happen, Jason?
Well, Rich, what it came down to was, and Mike Shanahan has talked about this, the owner, Daniel Snyder, backed Robert Griffin III, and he didn't back Mike Shanahan. Mike Shanahan has talked about this. He's been open about it. It was clear to Mike Shanahan that the things Robert Griffin III told him during the 2000 and after the 2012 season was something that he had the backing of the owner. So what you had is a situation where they felt that Shanahan was the problem. Shanahan and his son Kyle, who was the offensive coordinator, they felt those guys were the problem, and that all they needed to do, they being Bruce Allen, the general manager at the time, and Dan Snyder, the owner, just get a coach in here who was a good guy and who could work with Robert, and everything would be fine. The problem, Rich, came in because the new coach quickly determined that Robert could not do the things that Mike Shanahan said he couldn't do. So all of a sudden you have the guy who was charged and tasked with fixing Robert Griffin III reaching a conclusion even quicker than the previous regime did that this is not going to work.
So why did they go ahead and give him the $16.2 million one-year contract for next year? Why did they just not go into the season and say, let's see what happens, Jason?
Well, Rich, you have to understand that for much of the time from the season ended last year till now, it's been all about trying to prop up Griffin and make this thing work. You pick up the $16.155 million option, which you exercise that option, which I wrote was a horrible move, something they should not have done. But they did it because they were trying to give him confidence. They were trying to prop him up. They were trying to say to their fan base, their beleaguered and fatigued fan base, that, hey, look, we believe in this guy. He's still our guy, and we're going to show you how much we believe in him, and we're going to pick up this option. The problem with exercising the option is it was guaranteed only for injury. With Robert's injury history, it was more than just a little bit of a gamble. I mean, this is a guy who's had 2 major knee reconstructions, a severe ankle injury. So it became a situation where, okay, how long are they going to let this play out? Because if he can't pass a physical at the beginning of the new league year, they're on the hook for that contract, but that's not going to be an issue anymore.
So do you believe he's played his last snap for the Washington Redskins, Jason?
Yeah, I do. I believe that ultimately they're going to release him.
When he clears the concussion protocol?
That would be my guess. I mean, I want to say this is just my opinion about this. I'm speculating on this, but my belief is, Rich, that once he is cleared medically, he will not be on the team much longer.
Yeah, because, well, I mean, as you pointed out, if he is hurt, that's the way that the 16.2 stays on their ledger. And they can't release him and not have that fully guaranteed. So why would they in any way run the risk, even of him getting him hurt in practice?
Well, Rich, it would make absolutely zero sense for them to keep him in the program to have something happen. Well, let's say, God forbid, Kirk Cousins would have suffered an injury, and then Colt McCoy would have suffered an injury. You can't put Robert Griffin III back out there. I mean, besides the fact that the coaching staff has no confidence in him, if you were to put him in a game, and again, remember, the key is if he can't pass a physical at the beginning of the new league year, that's a risk that I don't think they can afford to take. Now, there are some people who are close to the organization, in the organization, who will tell you that they would have eaten that $16.2 million essentially if they believed that he was making progress and he was their guy. But, Rich, what fans don't understand is coaches don't only grade the film from the games. They grade every practice. They look at everything. And from the beginning of training camp until now, he has just not made the type of progress you would expect from a guy going from year 1 to year 2 in an offense. Kirk Cousins did. Rich, I'm not saying Kirk Cousins is Tom Brady. I mean, don't get me wrong here. But Kirk Cousins was the best option you had in your roster. And if you're moving forward into a 16-game schedule, you have to ask yourself, do we want to try to win or not?
Jason Reid, ESPN.com, NFL columnist, joining me here. A couple more questions for you. You mentioned how the coaches grade practices, they grade everything, and then they also see what goes on in the locker room. LT, LaDainian Tomlinson, Hour One, said RG3 began to lose the locker room when he couldn't handle success and made it all about himself. Ryan Clark said that RG3 has no meaningful relationships in the locker room. What does he do in the locker room to engender these sorts of reports if they are all, in fact, true, Jason?
Well, Rich, here's the thing. I don't think Robert is a bad person, but unfortunately, Robert did not do the types of things that you would expect a guy who's going to be in a leadership role to do. The Ryan Clark report about substantial friendships or relationships. Look, I talked to many people who talked about how aloof Robert is. Robert caused a lot of problems for himself a couple of years ago when he talked about what the receivers didn't do in a certain play. And Santana Moss, at the time, very respected veteran in that locker room, made it clear that Robert, needed to focus on himself. He shouldn't have said that type of stuff. Offensive linemen coaches have told me have had problems with him because he's so bad in the pocket, Rich, and he lacks pocket presence, which isn't shocking because he didn't play in a traditional offense. But because his pocket presence was so bad, he would make the offensive line look worse than it actually was, and he would never step up and say, well, this is on me. I made the wrong move here. I rolled in the coverage. I should have gotten the ball gotten the ball out of my hand here. So, Rich, when you add it all up, what you see is a guy who, maybe he was putting on airs and trying to be more confident to hide his own insecurities. I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist. I don't know. But I do know this, that when you talk to people with the team, it was clear that he was not someone who really was beloved in the locker room. Now, will people tell you, could you find players, Rich, who will talk about the fact, no, I'm cool with RG. No, that's my boy. We're friends. Yes, I'm sure you could because there's 52 other guys in this. I would never try to make the argument that he was despised or anything like that by everybody. Nothing is universal in this game. But, Rich, the problem is the combination of the poor to horrific play on the field and the fact that he was not a beloved figure in the locker room, I think that's very fair to say, created a situation where he really didn't have a whole lot of support. For him to have stayed in D.C. and to have made this thing work, he would have had to have continued to have played at such a high level. And, Rich, the irony of this whole situation is Kyle and Mike Shanahan People will look back at what they did, in my opinion, and say what a fabulous job they did, because they hit all this guy's flaws, all of his shortcomings, put him in an offense in which he had the most successful year from an efficiency standpoint for a rookie quarterback in NFL history. And the guys who did the most to help him and make him, quote-unquote, RG3 in the NFL, he pushed them away, and now he's alone.
Jason, thanks for calling in. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Anytime, Reid.
You bet. I'm going to take you up on that. Jason Reid knows. I told you he knew what time it was.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.